You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. I hope that you behaved yourselves while I was gone in West Virginia, hopping over on Tim Pool, getting up to no good over in Washington, D.C., because about a half an hour before we went on air over in the old country roads land itself, I started to see a lot of U.S. court decisions fly in and new information regarding FBI corruptions, possible referrals that may have made it all the way to Attorney General Barr's office during the first Trump administration that were never made public to the light of day. Serious corruption stuff. And that was before the federal courts, the trade courts, the appeals courts, and of course the Supreme Court decided that this needed to be the day that we turn the printer on maximum and start chucking out court decisions like the Waffle House is chucking out reasonably priced breakfast meals. And my, oh my, judges and tariffs, injunctions, oh my. Lawsuits over, for example, the Trump tariff. Several states gathered together and said that they were very upset over the Trump executive orders, basically referring to a 1977 law that suggests the executive branch through the President of the United States has the power to impose tariffs and certain trade deals without the consent of Congress under a national emergency. Now, national emergency powers for an executive branch, those are bad. Those are terrible. Every time throughout history, every single executive branch of a republic that has given itself a clause that says, in times of national emergency, the president can tell Congress to go pound sand. Every single time, any nation on the left, on the right, Europe, Asia, the Americas, has had one of those clauses in place, it has gone very, very, very poorly. Very poorly. And so what we've seen is the executive branch has grown in size and the ability to basically do whatever it wants. And your congressmen and mine have grown lazier and lazier, abdicating their God-given responsibility, and people endowed responsibility, citizens of the United States, gave them the responsibility to pass laws and to keep the other branches in check. So because of that severe imbalance, the executive agencies have just grown in size and scope. And as Obama said, governing with a phone and a pen after he lost the midterms, then you saw Trump govern more with phone and pen, and then Biden governed even more with executive orders. And now Trump swings into the room and says, tariffs for everyone all the time, more than ever before. And it turns out that the national emergency clause of the 1977 law that allowed the President of the United States to enact certain tariffs under national emergencies, well, saying that Europe charges us more for dairy is therefore a national emergency, that's not a national emergency. Now, is that an indictment of whether or not the tariffs are good for the American economy or short-term or long-term diplomatic pressure and means? No, that has nothing to do with any of it. It is not within the right of the President of the United States to simply declare, hey, we are getting ripped off by Vietnam. And so therefore, national emergency, presto, hesto, tariffs everywhere. That's not how that works. By the way, this is why national emergency clauses are bad. Who decides what a national emergency is? Technology changes so fast, and the scope of a government's power is in flux constantly, so it's very hard to write a law that says this is what a national emergency is and what it isn't. So the three-judge court under the U.S. Court of International Trade, 99% of us had never heard of the U.S. Court of International Trade up until today. The ruling from this, or yesterday, I should say, the ruling from this three-judge panel yesterday evening in New York ruled that Trump's Liberation Day tariffs exceeded his authority and left the country's trade policy dependent on his whims. And the Trump administration came back and said two things. Number one, we haven't even finished the lawsuits yet. Like, there are a lot of lawsuits that are still in practice about this. You're basically issuing a ruling before we've even made the case for these tariffs, which is not cool. You know, let's follow the, what is it they call it? The due process, perhaps. and actually go through the lawsuit before you start ruling whether or not certain things are or aren't a violation of the executive authority in this situation, according to this law. Because there really are a lot of different tariff laws in the United States that outline ways that the Trump administration can or can't assign tariffs with or without the consent of Congress, or whether or not the House needs a certain threshold to assume certain tariffs, whether you're assigning tariffs on a sector or based on an entire nation. Obviously, the Ukraine-Russian war and the India-Pakistan very short-lived war, those could be considered international situations that require immediate tariffs to calm the situation down, because certain United States laws, for example, allow the U.S. to act as an arbiter on the international stage, which means the president is acting as the arbiter. Congress can't act as an arbiter between two nations. In fact, congressmen and women are really discouraged from acting against the foreign policy wishes of an administration. That's not under their purview. They're supposed to ratify or deny treaties. That's really about it. So what does this all have to do with today? Well, today, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which oversees the International Trade Court, granted the Trump administration's request for a temporary administrative stay. So this gives the court time to review all of the legal arguments and filings, some of them very well presented, some of them written in broken crayon, and the Trump administration has to submit its briefings by June 9th, after which the the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit will determine the next steps. So the tariffs are back on. Now, this is interesting because Trump still hasn't really decided whether or not he's in favor of certain tariffs, for example, for Canada, for Mexico, for the EU. And essentially, right now, the Trump administration's tariff policy is a child hopped up on caffeine, running into a room and really quickly flipping the light switch on and off. And it's really bad for the markets when that occurs. So the stock market had a really good day, and then things kind of slumped off because, again, the tariff policies that are instrumented don't appear to be set on any kind of fixed point. And in essence, this just isn't over. There are a lot of other laws that are going to come into play. The Trump administration really likes tariffs. It is too soon to tell. And I've seen everyone on all sides of the tariff fights. So I've seen the moderate Republicans and the kind of traditional conservatives who despise tariffs, a lot of libertarians as well. They were celebrating that it was blocked. Then I saw the populist MAGA crew and the 90s labor Democrats that shifted over to Trump in the last election, cheering that the temporary block was in place. Everyone's celebrating too soon. They are. There are a lot of things left to decide on tariff policy, and it is going to end up changing drastically based on two things no one has really discussed so far. So Tyler O'Neill, colleague of mine over at the Daily Signal, he pointed out earlier today that the Supreme Court of the United States struck down a very weird Washington, D.C. appeals court decision called Seven County versus Eagle County. So in this case, there was a railroad that was supposed to be built. And the Environmental Protection Agency threw a hissy fit because, and I kid you not, the Saskatchewanese bird beetle nests there 1 month a year. Like that kind of a nonsense. You guys know the regulations that I'm talking about there. Day ending in Y stuff for the EPA. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that, that's not a thing. If someone has gone through all of the proper permits now, it was an 8-0 decision. Jackson was noticeably absent. But as far as various activist groups essentially blocking any progress and causing small courts to essentially ban things through injunctions is no longer going to be allowed. It's a major decision that does start to clear up a huge portion of the gray area during the Obama and Biden administration's executive rule kingdoms. Additionally, we have the United States versus CASA. That one is going to be a massive, massive, massive case, and nobody's talking about it at all. This case that is coming up that the Supreme Court is digging into more arguments on is, without a doubt, the biggest Supreme Court decision that is going to come down in the next 10 years. The Supreme Court is deciding whether or not federal district courts will have the authority to issue universal federal injunctions. So all of these blocks and stays and freezes and injunctions and all of those other nonsensities that have become a facet of the current Trump administration, well, no longer might be allowed. So some random Connecticut district judge may no longer have the authority to rule what people in Indiana, Ohio, Colorado, Texas are doing regarding certain federal action. We'll let the radio crew head over to commercial. We'll stick on over on the live stream for something out of Chuck Grassley's office, believe it or not. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. By the way, sorry I'm talking so quickly this evening. There is a god-awful amount of news to get to, and some of it broke as we were prepping for the Timcast yesterday. I'm sitting across from Tim. The other guys in the room are talking about things that are enjoyable, kind of playing on some guitar, talking about things that were fun. And all of the sudden, falling onto our laps, Tim and I had this gut-wrenching feeling that only broadcast hosts who will be lambasted if they get something wrong on the air have. Which is, oh no, oh no, oh no. There is a very complex story that has just been released. I have less than 30 minutes to read it, assess it, decide what is true and isn't true, what has concerns, so that I can share it with my audience. And so Tim Pool and I are basically sitting opposite each other, scrolling through all of these stories because Chuck Grassley, looking through a series of documents released by the Department of Justice and Kash Patel's FBI, found that in Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which was the investigation into whether or not Trump colluded with the Russian mob, which later became Trump colluding with the Russian government, that hoax, with Lisa Strzok and Carter Page, Fusion GPS, the Hillary Clinton Oppo research scandal that essentially tried to cripple the first Trump administration and largely succeeded by creating a series of hoax-filled investigations, desperately trying to say that Donald Trump was a Russian asset. This later became the lever for both of the Trump impeachments. It became a central part of stalling almost any and everything in the first Trump administration based completely on a lie. Well, now we find through Chuck Grassley's office that Fusion GPS contractor Nellie Orr lied to Congress under oath about her contributions to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. So she said that she never actually worked with the DOJ any time throughout Operation Crossfire Hurricane. That's a lie. She worked with them extensively. Extensive communication with Lisa Holton, Ivana Nizich, Joseph Wheatley. She also suggested to Congress that she totally had never worked on a ham radio to basically bypass any kind of communication regulation and transmit information. It appears that actually Nellie Orr did take 6 ham radio classes and her exam to get her license. It is very, very, very much not allowed to tamper and screw around with the FCC's rules on like ham radio operation unless it's a declared emergency in your locality. Why do we bring up? What is the smoking gun about this? What these documents reveal, additionally, is that a series of referrals were made to Attorney General Barr, essentially saying this is all a hoax, there's nonsense, and the people in these current investigations are lying openly. Well, that referral either never reached Barr's office, or he tossed the referral out once he got it, or the referral went somewhere else. Now, Kash Patel is starting to discover in places that there should not be referrals, all of these various referrals that essentially would have stopped these investigations cold in the first Trump administration. To boil this all down to one basic point, the bureaucratic individuals who neither you nor I elected, who were hired in all of these various agencies, made the disturbing decision to act against their constitutional oath, to act against the law of the United States, and essentially furthered this Trump investigation on the Russia hoax so that his Department of Justice could not function. It was immobilized. So that the executive offices were immobilized because of testimony time. So what is going to come out of here, I know the common criticism we've made that, well, I'm sure, Congress will send a very angry letter and that will be the end of it. maybe don't get out ahead of your skis on this one either, because we now have the official invitations that will likely turn out to be subpoenas. Congress has a pretty decent score here to actually drop the hammer if it wants. And there's a reason that it has been done in this way that we'll talk about very briefly, and then we'll, make fun of the media and some other nonsense. We'll catch the radio crew back from commercial here. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, of the strange situations, the very strange and weird circumstances regarding the Russia hoax for the first Trump administration, a lot of this centered around James Comey, Hillary Clinton's boo thing, who is now being asked what he thinks by people like Wolf Blitzer over on CNN, what he thinks about all of these investigations that are being reopened. So, for example, the January 6th pipe bomb investigation has been reopened. The cocaine in the White House investigation has been reopened. The Autopen stuff is now being looked into. And, of course, the Operation Crossfire Hurricane situation, among others. Because it is fun as it is to kind of guess over on social media, I bet they, had a big bonfire in the middle of the room and everyone was shredding papers and documents and getting rid of things. It doesn't work like that. It, in fact, leaves a much more disturbing and damning paper trail to destroy something like that rather than just to hide it where it shouldn't be and kind of leave it open forever. Far more effective than closing an investigation is just to leave something on the shelf for eternity and say, no new updates, we're waiting on something. Blame it on some bureaucratic accounting or procedural error, and then leave it to rot. Imagine just being left on hold forever. It is essentially what the FBI appears to have done to obstruct a lot of very important things that the American people demanded answers on under Christopher Wray, under James Comey, under that entire bureaucratic legacy crew. And now Comey's being asked about it, and he is getting very visibly nervous. The first half of the clip, he tries to play it off. And the second half of the clip, he starts to kind of hyperventilate. He loses his words, starts to sweat on air, because if Kash Patel, who very much knows where to look, is releasing some of this stuff to the American public,
Something supported by a lot of conservatives out there. What do you make of this?
It's a little confusing to me, honestly. I'm sure it's a huge adjustment to go from being a podcaster to being the deputy director of the FBI, but I don't understand this tweet. First of all, I assume that the investigation of the pipe bomb that was found on January 6th was never closed. The FBI never closes such a thing.
That's not true. That's not how that works.
So I guess it means they're going to focus on it more. And as to the other things, I thought the Supreme Court marshal had investigated the leak of the opinion, the draft opinion. I don't know what the FBI's role is there.
The FBI does not have to ask the Supreme Court marshal for permission to investigate something of concern.
Cocaine at the White House, I thought the Secret Service investigated that.
The FBI does not have to get the permission of the Secret Service to investigate something on White House property.
I don't follow it and understand it. I also don't understand who the audience is for this tweet. The FBI often calls for public assistance, or in matters of great public concern will announce an investigation to reassure the public. This seems much more narrowly targeted, maybe to a former podcast audience.
Okay, so now we're going to see, after a short clip played of Senator Patty Murray, you're going to see Comey start to act a little bit weird here.
Are you concerned that the FBI will still be able to fulfill all of its important duties with Director Kash Patel leading the Bureau?
I hope so. That I cringe at that clip. I actually feel kind of sorry for the guy. It's like showing up for a final exam with no pencils and no paper, and you didn't even know there was a final exam. And so I hope the career people are able to support the...
Oh, he just said the thing. I hope that the career people, i.e. the unelected bureaucrats, are able to what, James? Are able to what?
Director and the deputy director. There are lots of people in the FBI who know what they're doing. I hope these two guys are letting them guide them.
You think they know what they're doing?
The career people know what they're doing.
No. The career people know what they're doing, but the new director and the deputy director.
Nothing in their life or their career gives me confidence that they know anything about leading an organization.
I love that. Kash Patel was multiple times decorated by Obama for his work in that administration, specifically in the FBI. So as far as all of the arguments he's making, again, he does the slip and it completely throws him off. It's, again, really, really funny. That brings us over to something that is especially fantastic. So the House and the Senate now are digging into a full investigation into the cover-up of Biden's cognitive decline and the Autopen. So I know, again, a lot of people are suggesting, well, all, the Senate or Congress is doing is just, kind of write angry letters. Well, now what you have is a larger Senate majority of Republicans who weren't in the Senate last time, who are in fact kind of attack dogs. Eric Schmidt is with John Cornyn launching this investigation in the Senate, and over in the House, Comer's out for blood here. Comer's not playing around. And I think that what you're going to see with the Trump DOJ making it clear they have no problem prosecuting, for example, congresswomen who Kool-Aid Man, oh yeah, do the old MacIver body slam of federal agents, that you really might see a couple of key players here who are brought for testimony being told to answer a few questions. And if they don't, I cannot yet reveal my source, but not just contempt, but inherent contempt, i.e. the very tiny jail cell below the Capitol being used. Kevin O'Connor, former White House physician, Ashley Williams, former deputy assistant to President Biden, Neera Tanden, former senior advisor to President Biden, and Anthony Bernal, the former chief of staff to First Lady Biden. Now, the former chief of staff to Jill Biden, Anthony Bernal, he appears in a very weird clip in which one of the James O'Keefe crew, I believe, or the Project Veritas crew, I can't remember which because they used to be associated, got David Hogg, who led part of the DNC for like 3.5 weeks, to suggest that actually Jill Biden's chief of staff was running the show.
I would say Pelosi's actually very good at her job. I don't agree with the stock trading stuff. I mean,
that is Project Veritas, not the O'Keefe crew.
She gets better returns than almost every hedge fund in this city every year. Some of these members of Congress make trades that are like way too well timed to not have like insider knowledge. They happen to be some of the best financial analysts in human history.
Have you spoken against that?
I've talked to them, but it's also like, I know that if I pick that fight, it's going to be harder for us to get gun control passed. So I have to pick my battle.
Now, here's where things get interesting. So he calls things corrupt. He talks about Pelosi being good at her job. He talks about Congress and the insider trading knowledge. He talks about congressmen owning stocks. And then at the very, 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 very end of this particular interview, he mentions that the corruption extends to Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, that was the guy that was running the Autopen. Trump's crypto czar, David Sachs, says that, well, it was actually Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren who was running the Autopen for Biden.
This is the financial system of the future, Jesse, and we have to encourage it. What the Biden administration was doing, and let's face it, it wasn't Biden. Elizabeth Warren controlled the Autopen during that administration. She, for some reason, has this pathological hatred of the crypto community. She wants to drive this community offshore. She doesn't want it happening in the United States. That's the wrong policy for the United States. We want all the innovation happening here. This is a financial system of the future. It's cheaper. It's more efficient. We want it happening here, Jesse, and I think people are thrilled that President Trump is making that possible.
So, I don't think yet we have any idea who, in fact, was running the Autopen. I think that this is what an investigation would be for. And given the Trump administration's desire to actually go all out again, this isn't a re-election dependent administration, you actually might see a little bit here. And the reason I suggest that you will see a little action here is the same thing as the Supreme Court. I said this also on the Timcast yesterday. The left has consistently pushed way too far, way too fast. And in doing so, yeah, they've upset the populists, but like populists are always upset. They have upset the moderates. Do you know how far you have to push to get John Roberts annoyed? That's what the left did with the court cases. That's why the Supreme Court is probably getting ready to drastically limit district court judges. Whereas over on the House, to actually get a House leadership or a Senate leadership behind actually prosecuting these individuals is in fact becoming more and more likely. Now, we'll have to see the radio crew in just a second. We'll stick around over on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, let's talk a little bit about the New York Times and some good old-fashioned just weirdness. So you haven't heard a whole lot from the New York Times in the last couple of days because they are wholly obsessed with Harvard University. So the Trump administration told Harvard, hey, stop participating in racial discrimination and violating the Civil Rights Act. And Harvard said, let's see, what's the phrasing? No. So the Trump administration said, cool, well then we'll just take the money that we give you upon the contingency that you will follow federal law. And Harvard said, okay, fine. Well, we're going to whine about it. We'll have Barack Obama tweet about it because, that's always the squeaky wheel that needs the grease. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing. So the Trump administration said, fine, we'll look at canceling your current federal contracts. So the New York Times has been focusing on this because the only people left who buy the New York Times are Harvard graduates who are baristas in Starbucks these days because graduating from Harvard means absolutely nothing anymore. In fact, less than half of the students currently at Harvard are majoring in anything related to real science. I mean, they might call some certain things in the science adjacent majors, but social services is not a science. But that's what Harvard's churning out. Far less in the doctor and the engineer and the scientist category than they used to. So the New York Times columnist Kenneth P. Vogel has released today what I have to say is one of the most hilarious criticisms of the Trump administration, who is, again, doing things in a very particular fashion. He says, as long as you demonstrate support for Trump and claim that you were targeted by the Biden Justice Department because of that support, you have a chance at a pardon, even if you previously pleaded guilty and apologized for your crimes. He's making the case that the Trump administration pardoning individuals is, again, just political ploy and that you can essentially kiss up to Trump to get a pardon, which is rather strange to see coming from the same New York Times columnist that said it was totally fine for Biden to get out there and say Hunter Biden's prosecution was overtly political and then slapped a pardon on his boy. My. Again, as Michael Scott says.
Well, how the turntables...
So, fantastic stuff that they think that's going to play. By the way, as far as higher education goes with the New York Times and Harvard, Harry Enton over on CNN, the man of polls, the data-driven sledgehammer of numbers, he's argued quite consistently that Americans just don't give the flip of a wooden nickel about higher education and the special rules they were able to play by. It's basically time to pay up. Here's Harry Enton over on Harvard.
I think going into this, I think a lot of Americans thought that higher ed needed a nice kick in the rear end. What am I talking about here? Well, why don't we take a look at high confidence in higher education? You go back a decade ago, 57% of Americans had high confidence in higher education. Look at where we are now. That number has plummeted as of last year, down to 36%. We're talking about a 36-point drop among Republicans specifically. Get this, 68% of Americans said that higher education was on the wrong track. So it's a question of whether or not people agree with Trump's tactics, but they definitely agree with him on the idea that there is a problem with higher ed overall.
That is a big deal for a few reasons, but let's boil it down here before we catch the radio crew back from commercial. The Trump administration has a lot of different strategies and tactics for dealing with things. Not all of them are popular, but the idea itself is very popular. Here's the fun part. Trump's a pragmatist, which means that if the American people really don't like the tariff policy, then he backs off of it. The Democrats can make fun of him for it and say, Trump always cowers, he always backs away from things. Pragmatism is popular with the American people. It is not a sin or a vice. We're going to grab the radio crew back from commercial here in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Now, while the Trump administration has a consistent amount of momentum that they are currently working with on a lot of things like immigration. You can look at the Trump kind of posturing now on Scott Bessent organizing certain trade deals. Again, when Peter Navarro gets in front of the camera, it's kind of a different story. There is a bit of a danger for the Trump administration. And I've really tried to hold off kind of my judgment on certain portions of administrative policy because I really do believe that because Trump is a pragmatist and because he airs his ideas out in the open, that usually the best idea, or at least an idea that is not deeply unpopular with Americans, ends up winning out. So again, like the Marco Rubio deportations of visa holders who incite violence on American campuses, or now looking at revoking a ton of Chinese national visas who are, taking pictures of American military installations and sending those back to Beijing, like all normal visa holding tourists do. While the Trump administration has made some excellent moves there is a bit of a danger. So one of these is the current Trump communication on Vladimir Putin and Russia. So the Trump administration came in and said, all right, Putin, we'll make it kind of a deal here. The United States has been kind of supplying Putin during the Biden administration. We're going to take a step back. We'll be the kind of independent arbiter here, and we'll try to get the world to essentially treat you normally if you end this war, which will keep the Russian economy from collapsing and being wholly dependent on China, which despite Putin kind of gold bricking over, he's not very fond of being wholly dependent on China. Economies wholly dependent on China don't tend to do so hot in the long term. Can I get a Laos? Can I get a Cambodia? Anywho, so as far as the Russian organization is concerned, there was a lot of usefulness in taking Trump at his word and coming to the table to negotiate. But Putin didn't do that because Putin was winning the war. And so the Trump administration said, Trump said, we'll give him 2 weeks. And 2 weeks went by, and then Putin, again, threw some drones and missiles into Ukraine, and Ukraine threw some drones and missiles back, and things heated up again. And the Trump administration said the same thing. Well, in 2 weeks, we'll know whether Putin's serious or not. And 2 weeks went by. And again, please don't take my word for it here. The Trump administration has, in all actuality, been saying that we're totally going to know what Putin's intentions are 2 weeks from now for the last 8-9 weeks.
You trust President Putin?
In about 2 weeks.
Is Ukraine doing enough to get this?
I'd rather tell you in about 2 weeks from now.
Keep saying 2 weeks about President Putin. What is 2 weeks? Give us, what is the actual date? What is the timeline?
2 weeks or less, and if it's a little more at the time, I say, but, they're losing a lot of people.
Did you see those little dates up at the...
So just as a bit of a note here, this is a line that is being opened up for the left to punch on that's unnecessary. You don't have to do this. I want the Trump administration to succeed. I want them to be successful. I want the Ukraine and Russia war to come to a close. And I want the American people to get the most out of that deal closing, because it is, in fact, America first to see a peaceful situation in Europe so that Europe can transition to footing its own bill, so that America is essentially not doing it so Europe can have free healthcare. That is, in fact, something that is very important to the American people. But by simply giving Putin the kind of the cop-out every few seconds, because, Putin has some advisor mention World War III and all of a sudden that buzzword gives everyone the spookies. No, that's a bad way to do foreign policy. It's a bad way if your opponent says a big scary word and then you run home and go, well, we don't want that now, do we? Yeah, not a good idea. Now, I do place a lot of the blame on this particular instance on the Trump negotiator extraordinaire. And I've heard, a lot of praise. I've heard, a lot of criticisms. I personally, this is just me. I do not believe that right now the negotiation team from the Trump administration that is being sent over to various places around the world, like the Middle East, to talk with Iran or to talk with Russia, I haven't seen any actual outstanding, incredible deals being given. I haven't. I haven't seen any kind of brilliant maneuvers that have dropped phenomenal negotiation strategies here. I haven't. And that becomes a problem not just with Russia, but also with Iran. So the current Israeli-Iranian nonsense, in which the old Obama deal, in which Iran was allowed to enrich uranium, as long as there was oversight, wink, wink, possibly being brought up again, is really not a good idea whatsoever. So according to Channel 12, kind of international news agency. President Trump ordered the U.S. military to halt any further cooperation with Israel on potential strikes against Iran and its nuclear site after Israeli Prime Minister Benny Netanyahu instructed the Defense Ministry and Air Force to continue preparations for a strike operation against Iran. There's a little bit of a discrepancy here as to whether Israel is just planning to go ahead and do it, or if this is insurance, as in if Iran doesn't take whatever deal the Trump administration puts forward, there will be consequences. We don't know. But the question was brought up to Trump as to whether or not he told Netanyahu essentially not to act too provocative towards Iran, and well, Trump answered in the affirmative.
President, back on Iran, did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Mr. President, just last on sanctions.
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him? Did you
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now. Because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong, with inspections and no trust, I don't trust anybody.
Again, that's good. It's good not to trust the Iranians, but the problem is when Trump sends Steve Witkoff over to talk with Iran or over to talk with Putin, Steve Witkoff screws the pooch every single time. Steve Witkoff sucks. He's not good at his job. He's not. He has not. Again, right now, the deal he's negotiated for the newest Hamas ceasefire is Hamas will release one hostage and Israel will release 125 Hamas terrorists. What on God's green earth kind of a deal is that? Why? And now with Iran, the idea, and by the way, to go to this point so that now even Vice President J.D. Vance, our nation's most good-looking vice president in history, he has signaled that Iran can't be trusted and that negotiations with Iran may not be in good faith. He claims that Iran, being an Islamic diktat, may see nuclear war as a fulfillment of the will of Allah, in stark contrast to the Russian nuclear threats being more reserved. Essentially, what Vance has pointed out is that unlike Russia, who essentially whenever anyone points out that there are a lot of talk and that they need to remind themselves that they don't run the entire world, that Russia goes, oh, well, we have the nukes right over here. And there's really just a lot of bluster. But when the Islamic terror state of Iran says we're going for a nuke, don't you dare touch our enrichment procedures because we need nuclear power, extremely oil-rich nation, all of the sudden, what, they're blustering too? Absolutely not. And I've seen a lot of really silly nonsense today talking about why it's good to just go around boot licking. That's what Steve Witkoff does. He just licks boots. He doesn't project peace through strength. And what I believe that we're seeing right now is the Trump team kind of run out of patience for some of the certain things. I don't personally believe that Steve Witkoff is long for his particular role, just as I don't think that Peter Navarro is long for his particular role at this point. They have delivered disappointments rather than results. And that is going to come into play when we start digging into kind of the future, what needs to happen, because right now you've got a lot of people arguing about kind of the Doge cuts thing and why that's not coming through on the big, beautiful bill. The Democrats are trying to paint a vision, kinda. We're going to get to that in a second. It's the, for the radio crew, we'll send you over to the commercial land. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, while the Republicans are again, kind of going back and forth on the big, beautiful bill. The House is getting ready to prep some investigations, that kind of stuff. The left has really been unable to come up with any kind of an idea as to how they want to move forward. They don't really have any kind of a policy or a plan or a procedure in place. Everything they've tried is awful. And all of the old standbys that they can lean on for leadership and money, like Elizabeth Warren and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, are about to get kneecapped by the revelations of the Biden collapse that are only getting worse. So we've now flipped over to Pete Buttigieg because, of course, that's going to be the ace in the hole. So he appeared on the MSNBC's Jen Psaki show to to talk about how Bernie Sanders is popular because he paints a vision. And that's what the left and the Democrats need to do, like Pete Buttigieg. They got to paint themselves a real nice vision. Here you go.
We have got to make sure that our opposition and everything that we're against, and obviously there is a lot to be passionately against right now, but it has to travel with a clearer picture of what we are for. Because there are a lot of voters who, for whatever reason, and Democrats might be shocked by this, but for whatever reason, did not find any of the things they've seen so far about Donald Trump to be disqualifying. And what that means is there's something else that, it doesn't mean they necessarily loved him, but they need to see something more. This is not a question of accommodating things that we don't agree with or watering down or changing our values. It is a question of making very clear to everybody how your everyday life is different if we're in charge compared to if they're in charge. What your life could be like if wages went up the way that we propose that they be raised. What we would do with the money if we successfully stopped the tax cuts for the wealthy.
It's incredible to hear Pete Buttigieg talk about what he would do with the money. That's wild. That's actually wild. Again, remember, Pete Buttigieg was given $7 billion to build solar charging stations at rest stops the federal government already owns. And he built 4. He built 4 charging stations. And the other 3 weren't even completed. $7.5 billion. Sorry, excuse me. Incredible. So that's the man that's going to be talking about results. Now, it's funny. He says, well, we shouldn't, be complaining and whining about things that we don't like. We really need to focus on what voters want. What Pete thinks that voters want is gay marriage and porn. I'm not joking. Here's Pete Buttigieg.
Of course, we should be talking about how, if Speaker Johnson got his way, it wouldn't be possible, not just for gay people to get married, but for straight people to get divorced, let alone like birth control or how he would want to regulate porn or whatever most people would have a problem with. But
I love that. Speaker Johnson, wants to ban gay marriage and straight divorce, and he wants to regulate porn, all that stuff. By the way, I'm looking for the bill that Johnson's put forward that says any of that. I'm looking for it. Right now, Johnson's just graying his hair and going bald from the fights in the House right now. So I'm not seeing whatever. Yeah, good luck with that. Best of luck to you there, bud. We're going to swing over to the radio crew. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. It's good to be with you. I would love to let those who are watching online know I have received during the show 3 text messages, 4 DMs, and an email about why I'm not wearing a collared shirt and blazer, but instead a knit polo. I'm also being informed that because I'm wearing a gold necklace underneath it, that I look Italian. And so to that, all I have to say is, forget about it. That brings us over to the most important lesson to be learned today, which is not that I should never wear anything different, but that when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So Jake Tapper, the guy participating actively in covering up Biden's mental, physical, political declines, multiple of them, has, again, with his book with Alex Thompson, Original Sin, been running around the country trying to say, oh, we were fooled, we were bamboozled, Smeckledorfed, just like you. And Barry Weiss, over from the Free Press, kind of threw a nice question up to him. Jake's response is just precious.
But would you say that, looking back at the body of your work over the past, during the Biden White House, that you could have brought a level of skepticism, scrutiny, and curiosity to
I think
this story?
I mean, of course, I don't think there are very few members of the legacy media that I don't think could say that. But I will say that in October 2020, I interviewed Joe Biden and I asked if he would take a pledge to be transparent about his health. And in October 2022, the only time I had an interview with him during his presidency, I pointed out that The American people think he's too old. Whenever he's asked about that, he says, watch me. They're watching him. They still think that. I had skeptical interviews with Karine Jean-Pierre in 2023. And after the Her report, I had Kate Bedingfield come on the show.
Notice he doesn't mention Jen Psaki. The reason he doesn't mention Jen Psaki is because at the time of this interview, Jen Psaki is a news host, again, the first press secretary for Biden, over on MSNBC. So his awkward claim that he goes on to ramble on into infinity about, because he's just trying to gold brick, hang on, he's just trying to stump into the distance here, take a knee, run out the clock, is that the media didn't know. And really, I don't even think, there was nothing else they could do. After all, they asked a question, one whole question, and then, continued to obfuscate regardless. The reason I mentioned Jen Psaki is that producer Nick flagged while over on the live stream during the last commercial break for the radio, we were playing the Jen Psaki clip of her chatting with Pete Buttigieg. Today, during her show, MSNBC pulled the plug. Jen Psaki no longer has a primetime show on MSNBC. So, this is to the circle back. The lady who always knew how to bring out the Karen in all of us. Here's to you, Jen Psaki. All right, that's enough of that. There are a couple of things, that are worth kind of bringing up before we round out the day on the playing stupid games and winning stupid prizes, kind of motif here. There is a guy that I've been tortured with on the show for a while. In the very, very first video that was ever delivered, it was by Reese Vermus, an intern with us at the time. Was it Reese or was it you? Were you the one that brought the first croissant guy? Okay, so this is a producer Nick special who said that men and women were the same and that they were interchangeable because a big croissant and a little croissant are both croissants. And this is his argument for why, as a dude with a wang, he is a woman, which was incredible. He has, I guess, become one of the standard bearers, kind of the discount Temu Dylan Mulvaney for the left over on TikTok. And I mean, he's back again because me suffering is apparently the best way to end out the show. Special thanks.
There are people out there who are hell-bent on never, ever being accommodating to trans people.
He's telling the story of how he was misgendered. So listen to this tale of woe.
I will never call you by those pronouns. You will never have my respect or whatever it is. And is that really worth it to you? Putting all of that effort to be nasty? Because if we meet and you call me by the wrong pronouns, it's gonna be a confrontation. And I don't think you want that. I think you just want to go about your day. I want to go about my day. I don't want to have to be upset about getting misgendered. And I know you don't want to purposefully upset people. And if you do want to purposefully upset people, then you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself why. Why am I like this? Why
am I like this? Oh, because it's funny. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, I'm sure that you want to see the misgendering moment because, of course, this is the kind of individual that made the decision to film themselves while they eat, which, by the way, those kind of people are right up there with those who talk on speakerphone or FaceTime in public. But anywho, the moment of misgendering is literally a Disney waiter just setting down the food, seeing the dude with an Adam's apple and here you go, sir.
That is fancy looking. Cool.
The bottom is from Thailand?
Coconut bread from Thailand.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am. Sorry, my bad.
So again, I don't know if you guys are aware that at Disney World and Disneyland, in Epcot, they do hire people from the country of the different little places around the world. So at the Thai restaurant, they hired this person from Thailand, which humorously enough is usually made fun of for having a lot of people who are transgender, I guess. So a little irony there. He says, here you go, sir. And the guy's like, it's ma'am. Again, in the lovely bass voice that all women we know and love have. And then the guy is like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. He walks off. That's the big misgendering moment. And apparently, also records himself going to the bathroom because, if you want to say, hey, I'm very mentally healthy, there is nothing at all wrong with me. What you do is record yourself talking about the bathrooms and how you enjoy going to them.
Made it into Disney World. I don't really know what the deal is with bathrooms. No, Florida is really conservative. I don't know what the rules are. Trans women are allowed to be in women's bathrooms, but I'm about to go and use the bathroom because I have to tinkle.
Oh, you're so brave. And by the way, the rule is if you have the male parts, you use the restroom built for male parts. I don't know if you guys know this. The urinals aren't for just decoration. Like, they're not flower vases. I mean, my dude, I
get stopped, I guess. But I'm a woman, so I'm going to use the women's bathroom, and being in Florida or being in California or wherever isn't going to stop me. So,
you know what will stop you eventually playing this game? And I hope that he comes to his senses before this happens. I hope that he finds the help that he needs before this happens. Eventually, there will be a dad who sees a man go into the restroom who will not be playing. And when that man in a skirt comes out, there might be someone who throttles him. Because if that occurred when my family was going to use the bathroom and some dude walked in, no. That individual is not going to have the video recorded tinkling session that they seem to be obsessed with. Radio crew will catch you real soon. Just a thing or two to catch with the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, 2 fun and fancy free clips to share with you guys just before we head out for the evening. A smidgen, a smackerel of bonus tonus content here for you. Now, we all have heard a lot of talk about World War III and drones, and you may wonder for a bit of insight on how other countries are getting their drone systems ready to go. And I am here to tell you that China has unlocked the secret of martial arts robotics. Now, you might be thinking like the Transformers, maybe little Autobots roll out. Maybe some cool samurai robot stuff going on. Maybe it's Bruce Lee, but made out of metal. So if you can handle the suspense, the terror of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, introducing the new Chinese Boxomatic 3000. So first of all, I love that they're at least 3'4". If you see the guy in the beginning, that is a regular sized man. And I guess he has 2 children fighting, which, first of all, children robot fights, I'd bet on that. I would. That sounds awesome. I hope that's an attraction that comes to Chuck E. Cheese. Fight a robot to win tickets. That sounds awesome. Wait a minute. They're wearing helmets. Wait a minute. Hold on here, Nick. Wait a minute. Why are the robots... and gloves. I don't know if you guys know this, but the reason that people, when they box, wear gloves and a helmet is because you have a fragile skull and muscular tissue and skeleton that can get damaged if you repeatedly bring traumatic injury to them, especially the brain. That's clearly what happened to, Jasmine Crockett, knocked a few too many times in the head. That's why she's retarded. You got to be careful. All right. The Chinese robots here are robots. They're metal and semiconductors. I mean, if you smack it, I don't know what this is supposed. It's like smacking the TV remote. Like I'm gonna knock your AAAs out, man. So let's catch a little of this here. This is excellent.
成功的踢腿动作获得3分。对，而且看他那个。AI 测算师直接把。
Okay, wait a minute. Why did the robot lay there and rest for a second? He's a robot. He doesn't have to lay there and rest. So again, for those listening and not watching, which by the way, if you're listening, stop what you're doing. Go to the YouTube right now. Go to the latest episode of the Tony Kinnett Cast over on the Daily Signal, at Daily Signal. Go zoom to the end of the episode. Find this video. It's beautiful. This is art, a masterpiece indeed. The robot reaches out and does a very over-exaggerated kick that is not robot quick. You guys know that like industrial machinery moves very fast. Very, very fast. one of the reasons that you need to be careful on a factory floor, industrial equipment moves very quickly. The robot kick is like, I want you to mimic a sick child. Wait, I want to see the kick again. He gives him the knee, and it's a very slow knee, as though you were going to tie your orthopedic shoes afterward. The pink gloved robot flies backwards and then just lays there. And I kid you not, it then slackens its legs like it got the wind knocked out of it. Only here's the catch. There's no wind. It's a robot. He's like, oh, my circuits.
测算师直接把钻机小将击倒，又起来了。
Why is she counting in English? Wait a minute. Why is she counting in general though? You can't knock it out. It's a robot. Oh my gosh.
7, 8.
Why is she counting if the robot stood back up? If you're going to be a referee for boxing, after the contestant stands back up and draws their gloves front, the counting stops. Because guess what? They're not knocked out, Chief.
Box.
现在这两位各有一次倒地了。对，而且这次钻机小将是 AI 测算师打倒的。对。
Okay, now they're dancing around. Again, as robots, you don't need to dance around. Unnecessary, Gary.
他们的一个相互接触啊，特别像真的。
The air.
我刚才开玩笑时说的搓脚。
Now there's a robot. He's facing the other way. So the pink robot is facing the black helmeted robot head on. The black helmeted robot is like Angel Reese, not even facing the game at all. So if you can imagine, again, those listening, just staring off into space. I don't know. Maybe he's mad that the referee was still counting. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm turning the wrong way. All right, back to it."
一靠吧，你就感觉自己重心会偏。
They're doing some gloved punches. Also, gloved punches against metal. What is that supposed to do? This is the worst Rock'em Sock'em robots I've ever seen in my entire life.
而且我发现他们起立。
哟，这拳给的可以，非常准啊，直接一黑虎掏心。
I have no idea what they're saying in Mandarin, but this is the wildest takeout order I've ever heard.
正好打中钻机小将胸口，再来。
All right, hits him with the Shanghai egg roll.
这回又打中了
the General So haymaker.
硬肋啊！现在咱还真不能说软肋。
Oh, the chopstick kick. And wait a minute. Hold on a second. We're going to have to go into slow motion there, Kelly. Wait a second.
硬肋啊！现在咱还真。
So one robot went for a kick. The other robot did some type of like shot to the kidneys. Only I don't know if you guys know this. Robots don't have kidneys unless you're fighting a dialysis machine.
不能说软肋。
Ah, yes, the number one fatality to any Chinese Olympic component, the splits.
1, 2, 3.
The robot's like, and stay down. But then he's gonna fall. He's gonna trip over the pink robot, isn't he?
加油！
哇，这边已经变成格斗了。这不。
So the lady starts counting over again. She's like, I don't know which is down.
不是咱们传机了，
接下来准备裸脚。
对，
比赛结束。
哇 ，KO 了。
对。
Oh, that's not a guy. That's a lady. These really are short robots. I didn't realize she was the one that was counting. I was like, what's that young man doing out there in the boxing ring? Why is my Steak and Shake waiter refereeing robot boxing? That's the question I have. Now, look, you may say, what does this have to do with the Tony Kinnett cast? Well, it's very important for you to remember every once in a while that this entire world is composed of very creative people. And that the very creative people who are developing the weapons technology that's going to change the world, in fact, as far as it's gone, it's really not that impressive. I've seen a lot of fear-mongering, scare-mongering, a lot of horror stories about AI and how it's going to destroy us all. No, it's not. We are starting to reach kind of the upper ceiling of right now what AI can do. All of them. Google Gemini, ChatGPT, all of these various AI programs, Perplexity, they're struggling very significantly right now. Because, in fact, you can't replicate the human soul of creativity and second guessing and that kind of a thing. There is a limit. And right now, what we're witnessing in real time is the arrogance and pride of various people displaying their limits. A bit of advice to you here. If you have a weakness, displaying it in front of the world is not very good. And we'll talk a little bit more about President Z and Winnie the Pooh. Oh, bother. A little bit later tomorrow. Some of the riots that are coming out of China, perhaps the collapse of the Chinese hegemony, which is good because China has broken up and gotten back together about once every 300 years for the last 3,000 years. So it is, in fact, about time. We'll talk about that real soon, though, as well as a few more end-of-week closeout things. We're working on some great content for you here in the future. Do me a favor, though, before you go. Head over to Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link for that down in the description. Subscribe to the Tony Kinnett Cast over on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a ton. It really does. That would be a very big help to the team. We'll see you here tomorrow. Same great time, same great place. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.